Welcome to Through the Noise. I'm your host, Ernesto Glucksman. My next guest works for a company that's got an incredible product. It's AI-enabled camera that monitors food waste in a busy restaurant. David, thank you for joining me on the show. Really appreciate getting some time out of your busy schedule to explore this intriguing product, spot, things that you guys are doing with AI. I mean, that's one of the topics that I particularly like to understand is like how people are actually finding applicable uses of AI. You found the spot, or your company found the spot. This is Winnow, right? Winnow Solutions. You found the spot in chefs, in the world of kitchens, in the world of food, potential food waste. Can you give us the core product that's like pretty compelling?
Sure. So
Little
great
overview of
to
it.
great to be with you today. So at Winnow, we develop artificial intelligence tools to help chefs in large kitchens like staff restaurants, hotels, cruise ships, casinos, and retailers to run more profitable and sustainable kitchens by cutting food waste in half. And I'm sure we're going to get into this in a lot more detail in our conversation, but food waste is a really important problem. It's one that really kind of has a massive impact, both commercially and environmentally. And we think that a big part of the solution, at least in commercial kitchens, is adopting artificial intelligence, and in our case, computer vision, to effectively automate the collection of data and allow chefs to make better decisions. So that's really what we do.
And I should mention, David Jackson, you're the director of marketing. So you got like the full like problem, and then outcome all mapped out. And depending on who we're talking to, and, you have like the full potential applicability of this tool. But can you describe, it looks like to me, when I saw some of these pictures, it looks like a little LCD screen that's attached to the wall. And then there's
Yeah.
like a, trash can or something that picks up, and people are, what are they doing? Just
Yeah.
scraping the plates
Um,
off in there. Okay.
yeah, exactly. So maybe it'd be helpful to kind of unpick the problem, and then we can talk a little bit about the solution, right?
Okay.
So in any commercial kitchen, there's going to be food that's wasted, right? And that's not because teams are bad at their jobs or that they particularly want to throw food away. It's a natural byproduct of producing food at scale, right? And the problem exists because it's really difficult to measure the food that's being wasted. It's not realistic to employ somebody, in particular in current circumstances with labor shortages. It's not possible to employ somebody to stand next to the bin and take copious notes in terms of what's being thrown away. And so traditionally, what would happen in a kitchen would be that at the end of a service, typically the head chef or the executive chef or somebody on his or her team would use pen and paper, or maybe kind of enter some data into a spreadsheet in terms of what they thought was wasted, right? So it's pretty time consuming and not hugely accurate. And the way that we characterize the problem for the chefs is we're often asking our chefs to make quite complex forecasting decisions in terms of what food to produce on any given day in really stressful environments, right? But with imperfect information. And so if we can improve the insight and the information, we can help our culinary teams make better decisions and ultimately cut down on waste, right? So that's a little bit about the problem. In terms of how we solve that problem, we have a number of different products that go into the kitchen, but the one that you're referring to is Winnow Vision, which is our AI product. And effectively, the way the technology works is we're trying to teach a machine to see, so using computer or machine vision. And we're then kind of installing, we used to be known as an Internet of Things company, kind of when we were launched back in 2013. I think you probably call us an AI company now in 2022. But effectively, the hardware is a terminal that gets installed into the back of house just above the bin. And that terminal includes, as you say, a touchscreen tablet, but also a camera. So when food is thrown away, the camera takes pictures of the food that's being thrown from the salad bar or the hot counter or wherever the food is coming from. It takes a picture. There's a digital scale that sits underneath, so that automatically captures the weight of whatever's just been thrown away.
I was gonna wonder about that.
Yeah. And then in the cloud, we have the cost, right? So we have these kind of three critical pieces of information. We know what the item was. We know how much it weighed, and then we know how much it cost per kilo, and we've taken often that information from the clients in advance and as they've built out their menus with us. And so we can kind of triangulate those 3 data points to then come up with a conclusion, which is you've just wasted, say, $5 worth of sausages or whatever was thrown away, right? And in real time, we're able to feed that information back to the user as they throw that item away. And over the course of service, each time something is thrown away, we're recording that as a transaction. We're recording the monetary cost in the cloud, and the next day we're able to present analytics to the team and pinpoint exactly where food was wasted and hopefully give them some insights to reduce that waste going forwards. And we find that kind of equipping culinary teams with that insight and with those tools, you can typically cut food waste in half within about 6 to 12 months.
Wow. Half in 6 to 12 months. Because you got to have some you need to train. Are you training the analytics, the software, all of it for the specific installation? Because there's going to be variations, right? Depending on what type of kitchen they're using and size of the bin. So there's some time to ramp this up.
Yeah. So there's a couple of points here, right? So firstly, a cherry tomato looks the same in a Hilton kitchen as it does in a Marriott kitchen as it does in any other kitchen, right? So we have trained our AI to recognize over 600 different food items, and so with some degree of accuracy, we can identify, a fairly kind of broad range of items that you might typically find in any kitchen. Obviously, you're going to have items or dishes which are specific to a particular kitchen, and that would require some training. And the way that we would do that would be we'd ask the user at the beginning of the process as they throw something away to identify what the item was using the touchscreen on the terminal. But the place that we're at now is a user will throw food away. Once the AI is trained and we're at a high level of confidence, we'll present a range of options. So we'll say, right, here are 8 options, and we've got a really high degree of confidence that whatever you threw away is one of these 8 options, right? And then the user's still going to kind of identify and confirm which of those 8 items was thrown away. In the future, we hope to fully automate that process and automate the human interaction out of the process altogether. We're not quite there with the kind of sophistication and the kind of accuracy of the AI right now, but that's something that we're really working towards, and that's something that we're really excited about.
I mean, I can imagine in a busy enough kitchen, especially like on a big hotel where there's a conference and suddenly the activity and the effort is just ramped up to the nth degree. No one's going to have time to, count and weigh and then jot down like that. You could look at how hard is that to do it? Well, it's not that hard. Look at the plate, right? Roughly, but you realize it's totally inaccurate. And then it adds over time. And then you just have people, you're using people's data collection.
Yeah. And
it's not going to work.
We know that it doesn't work over time. You can get a pretty good read, for example, on a particular day, maybe a particular week, but over time, these tasks need to be automated because, as you say, in a busy kitchen, food waste is going to be like number 13 on the list of priorities, right? Like there are literally things on fire sometimes, and it's a very challenging time for the industry right now, post-pandemic, labor shortages, supply chain challenges. It's a really difficult time, and so we need to.
You could get close to, sorry to interrupt, but maybe you could get close if you assigned a person at that station who's only, but then you're like this poor person doing data entry, data collection.
It's just not feasible.
It's just not a good use of somebody's time there.
And so wherever we have repetitive tasks in any operation, today we're looking at where AI and machine learning can automate some of those tasks for us, right? I think the industry is really waking up to the opportunity here, though. So let me kind of lay out the kind of numbers.
Okay.
In a typical kitchen, and we have operations in 45 countries. We have over 1,400 units out in the field, so we're capturing lots of data in terms of the waste that goes on in a typical kitchen. In a typical kitchen, somewhere between 5 and 15% of the food that is purchased will end up in the bin, right? Typically, if you look at the profit and loss accounts of a kitchen, you may see pre-measurement somewhere between 3 and 5% would be what a kitchen would believe it was wasting, right? And so we're underestimating.
They actually thought they were wasting 3 to 5% of their food costs.
That would be a typical number that you might find historically in a kitchen's P&L.
Really, just guessing at it.
And it's not. It's taking a best view with the tools that were available. Right. Wow. And again, I really want to be clear. It's a difficult role. It's a difficult environment to work in. There shouldn't be any blame apportioned to anybody in this story. What we are saying is we have a new tool that can really help. There are times where we'll go in and we use our digital tools to measure what was being recorded manually, and we'll find that the food waste is actually a factor of 2 versus what was previously thought. But the good news here, though, that sounds like a really big problem. Right? It sounds like we're losing a lot of resources. It's a big problem for business. We'll get onto it, but it's a big problem for the environment as well. But we prefer to reframe it. It's a big opportunity, right? Because we know if you're wasting, say, 10% of the food that you purchase, and we can come in and cut that in half, that's taking 5% off your food purchasing costs straight off the bat. Right? We'd expect to deliver a return on investment of between 2 and 10 times our fees for a kitchen, depending on the type of waste profile and the size of the kitchen. And so kind of regardless of kind of where you come at this from, the reality is it's a massive financial opportunity for all commercial kitchens. And our view is that in the future, every commercial kitchen will be equipped with some type of AI device as it becomes easier to deploy, because the commercial imperatives of running a kitchen with already wafer thin margins, you will be necessary to make sure that the kitchen's being run with kind of ruthless efficiency. And so in doing so, we're going to solve a really big environmental problem at the same time.
Yeah, and I guess I should mention that that's a bit of your background. You've been through the nonprofit sector in the past, right? Kind of looked you up a little bit, and so how did you land this gig?
It's a good question. So I've been with Winnows for 7 years. Joined in 2014. We were a handful of early team members and 2 founders. Kind of fast forward today, we're about 100 people. We have offices in Singapore, in Dubai, in Romania, where I'm based, in our HQ in London, and also in Chicago. And we have operations, as I said, in over 45 countries. I'm a marketeer by kind of training. I started my career at the Guardian newspaper back in a long time ago, when the debate was how big should the newspaper be, which might date me somewhat. And then I worked for American Express, and I worked for a number of nonprofits. And I think I've always kind of looked at where I can have impact as a marketeer. I think that's really interesting, and I think increasingly we're looking to technology to kind of finding new ways of delivering impact at scale. But ultimately, it's about telling a story, right? And I think good marketeers are kind of 2 things: they're empathetic and emotionally intelligent, and they're good storytellers. And this is really important, I think, as we start to introduce a new technology into what is somewhat traditional a space, right? Often when Winnow would be deployed into a kitchen, it might be the first screen that goes into the back of house. And so one of the things that we try to do as much as we can at Winnow is to tell the stories of the chefs and the culinary teams who are using the product to really kind of, get great results and have a real impact. And they're really the heroes of the story. So a lot of my job is about kind of trying to provide a platform for the chefs, the kitchen porters, the sustainability leads, the CEOs and the leadership teams who are really trying to drive impact using our tools. And that's a big part of what we ultimately need for these types of tools to be adopted at mass. We're really kind of just scratching the surface at the moment in terms of the impact that we're having.
I mean, I would imagine in the restaurant business, it's like they probably have figured out their inputs pretty well. I have contracts. They're constantly analyzing, price of the raw materials, of the food costs. And right now, probably supply chain issues is the biggest problems. But I wonder, and I would assume that a chef just kind of meanders through the restaurant or just keeps an eye on like what customers seem to be wanting more, or when they run out of something, they go, well, we better get more of that than this other thing. But how many of these restaurants are really, really actively looking at what doesn't get consumed or what goes to spoilage, right? Because that's the thing about restaurant world that makes me super nervous is the fact that all their products have varied expiration dates, right? There's like certain level of shelf space, certain level of refrigeration, and then you got to rotate that stuff out. If you just had a week, and then like, I mean, aside from the customers, different tastes, and who knows if you have a big party or not, all that variability, it's just super hard to even just keep an eye on it. I would assume that a lot of these chefs and people that manage the operations, they have a feel for it. And I wonder if that's how they operate mostly.
I think you raise a couple of interesting points there, right? So the first thing I would say is there's some pretty, kind of sophisticated inventory management, models. Lots of the big businesses, like Hilton, Compass Group, Costa Cruise, for example. There's technology in place for kind of effective inventory management, and actually spoilage doesn't tend to be where most of the food is wasted, right? Okay. So what our data shows is it's kind of helpful to think about two different types of kitchen. There are kitchens which prepare food in advance, and there's kitchens which cook to order. So what you were talking about, perhaps your kind of local Italian, for example, right, or your ramen bar around the corner from you, they're going to cook to order. They're not going to know exactly who's going to come through the door on a given day, and most of the food that's wasted in those types of environments will either be there's a bit of spoilage, there's some kind of overproduction, i.e. they're making too much if they have to do any kind of preparation or mise en place in advance, or it's going to come back off customers' plates, right? And that actually is a major source of where food waste comes from. And if you juxtapose that with probably a bigger kitchen, so think about a cruise ship, a big hotel, that's delivering for a conference, for example, or a kind of breakfast buffet at a hotel or a resort. There, the team are forecasting in advance how many people are going to come. They're making food that then goes out onto a hot counter or a salad bar where it's got a kind of time that it can be held. And after that time, it may have to be thrown away. And it's kind of in those scenarios where the majority of the food is thrown away before it gets to the customer, and the majority of that is thrown away just because the team make too much, right? So that's where having a measurement tool like Winnow can really help, because if you know exactly which dishes, which items on your hot counter or on your salad bar you're making too much of, you can adjust production volumes, and quite quickly you can see food waste come down. I mean, we offer solutions across the board, right? So whether or not you're a cruise ship or a small cafe, we have different tools to measure your pre-consumer waste. And last year we launched a new product called Winnow Sense, which specifically looks at plate waste, right? And plate waste is a difficult, different and difficult challenge, because you'll have lots of plates coming back into the back of house. It's often a very kind of fast task to scrape a plate into a bin, and the technology that we've built kind of basically doesn't require any interaction at all. The plate is scraped, there's a picture that's taken, the weight is captured. At the moment on Winnow Sense, we haven't applied the AI model yet, but we're looking to do that in the future. But what we can do then is on a kind of service by service basis, we can look at how much per diner, per cover has been wasted. We can drill into the photos, which is really impactful. We can analyze those photos and say, right, on a particular day, these are the things that tended to come back from your customers. This is what they don't like. or that you're putting too much on the plate for. And this is where you might like to either engineer your menus or introduce some signage or some messaging into the dining area, which is going to help consumers make more sustainable decisions. And we're really excited about this. Like I said, we've just launched it. We ran an experiment with the behavioral science unit at the London School of Economics last year in a test program. And what we were able to do is get really accurate measurements of the amount of food coming back from customers' plates. And by introducing posters, we were able to test different approaches. And with some combination of messaging, we were able to reduce plate waste by 35%. So it's a big opportunity here, both to kind of help teams to make the correct amount of food, but also to kind of show consumers, for example, in a kind of all-you-can-eat type environment, actually don't fill your plate, full to the brim, come back and take a second helping, and we can help kind of introduce communications which will lead to kind of more sustainable behaviors.
So the conference stuff where the bins are like, here's the big bin of scrambled eggs. Oh, they reached the time frame. That's what the machine can then quickly assess how much was actually eaten, identify, because it's usually one product.
Yeah, so you'll have like
quickly.
You'll have your hot counter or your breakfast buffet or wherever, and you'll have scrambled eggs in a container, a gastro, and that will come back into the kitchen. That will be thrown away in kind of one go. And where you have those types of kind of transactions taking place, that's where we've trained the AI to be very accurate and recognize kind of 600 different items. In the future, as the kind of predictive ability of the model that we're building improves as we scale the amount of data that we're flowing into that.
For the combined to order food plate.
Yeah, what we're looking for is you literally, you're a restaurateur, you're interested in getting a handle on your food waste, you install a piece of kit into the back of house, you don't have to train your team, you don't have to do anything, and the next day you get analytics that tell you exactly what was thrown away. That's the kind of the place that we want to get to, and if we get to that place, then we solve the problem for the whole sector, which is really exciting.
But that's a tough one. The one that's already like the plate that's already been cooked, or your food cooked to order, where the ingredients are all mixed and everything's combined, and then every customer sort of they like this one, like the green peas more than the other one, right? So that's a tougher
for sure
clarity of picture. But do you guys see the AI? Like, are you getting better and better predictive analysis around that?
Absolutely. So,
however incremental, like it must be in the food AI world, this must be like the last mile of delivery.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really good comparison. And we look at a lot of pictures of bins on a kind of day-to-day basis as a business. So we officially launched Winnow Vision back in 2019 in partnership with IKEA UK. So we developed this technology with their support. We put the MVP, the minimum viable product, into their kitchen in one of their London stores, and their feedback was really helpful in kind of developing this technology. At that time it took a long time to train up the model to be accurate. We're able now to kind of install our hardware, and in a matter of weeks, turn our predictions on, and the kind of AI starting to make predictions, and just kind of shortening down the amount of time that it takes a user to kind of interact with the system and record a piece of food waste.
Now, do you guys have in the anytime you're doing analytics for individual customers, do you have the ability, or are there future plans to then do aggregate data out of an industry? I mean, if you have like 10 restaurants in a particular region, you could probably get a sense of, what products are, being diverted from food waste, right? That you can make more aggregate numbers.
Yeah. So what's one of the things that we're working on at the moment, which is really exciting, is using the images of how food is being prepared, right? So the chefs will, throw away, for example, the tops of tomatoes. And so we're quite interested at the moment in thinking about what's being thrown away that we could have used, and then how do we give insights
Uh,
and perhaps some kind of recommendations in what the team could have used that item for. So I'll give you an example of a kitchen in the UK being really creative with the data. So they saw that there was lots of kind of parsnip peelings going into the bin. They created a kind of dessert where they deep fried those parsnip peelings, dusted them with cinnamon and sugar, and put them on top of an ice cream. And it sounds a bit wacky, but it's absolutely delicious. And the kind of the best and the most value I think that we deliver in a kitchen is where you combine the intelligence and the insight derived from the technology, and you bring that together with the creativity and the ingenuity of a chef. And where we can bring those two things together, I think you can make absolutely brilliant dishes that both kind of do the right thing for the planet and for profit, but also surprise and delight customers, and that's what we like to see.
I wonder if there's also opportunities to offload some of the food waste itself. Like, you're a certain tonnage of whatever it is the Marriott hotels are doing, that you link some of that to other programs where they might be able to reuse some of that material for something else. So, right. So then you could, in theory, while they're looking at the analysis, you could bubble up the programs within the locality. Like, hey, if you could actually get them to put all the peas in this other bin, you could then send that to this other food kitchen that can repurpose that for something else before.
And like we would always kind of encourage, and I think there's widespread adoption now of kind of food surplus collection services, food banks, kind of other innovation kind of further down what we call the waste hierarchy. So what we really want to avoid is putting food into landfill. It's dreadful for the environment. A little bit better than that is using food waste to create energy. If a little bit better than that is using food that would have been wasted to feed animals, but ideally you want to use the food that would have been wasted to feed humans. But best of all is to prevent it from being wasted in the first place.
To begin with.
Exactly right, because then you reclaim 100% of the value of the item rather than a kind of a proportion, right? And so where we sit is at the top of that food waste hierarchy in the prevention stage. And what we're trying to do is say, right, be as lean as you can with the produce that you have, maintain your margins, do the right thing for the environment. Where you do have inevitable some waste, you should definitely be looking to try and redistribute that in the most appropriate way.
Yeah, like anything, you got to make it really simple, I would imagine, for these business owners and chefs, because I think that there's a rate of diminishing return for the effort. Like everybody, I can't imagine somebody wanting to. I think everybody that's scraping food off the plates wondering, like, why can't we do something with all this, right? But the problem is, and restaurants run lean. I mean, they run super lean as a profit center. I mean, it's like less than 10% margins, I would assume, for a decent restaurant, right? And in these times, God, everything's been thrown into out of whack, right? So, but can we get a tool then that can make the gathering of the, let's say we're as efficient as we could possibly be, as 90% as we think we could be, the last 10%, sure, that could save 40% food waste, but we just don't have the energy to even figure out what to do about that. So that's just the cost of doing business, right? And so you're coming in with this tool, you put it into the output process before it goes into the main outdoor trash can. You're like calculating that, and you're like, look, we can actually do something from all this. Here's some steps to consider, some different products, some different reuse, and then maybe in the future linking this to these other programs. I mean, man, you guys are on a really good spot. I can see why you guys have grown to 100 people in less than 7 years.
So I mean, it is good validation for the technology, and we're working as hard as we can to make the tool as fast, intuitive, easy to use for the teams in the kitchens that are using it, and making our analytics as kind of intuitive and as helpful to drive change as quickly as possible. But we have a massive challenge in front of us, right? A third of all food from farm to fork globally is wasted. It accounts for somewhere in the region of kind of 8 to 10% of greenhouse gases. From a kind of economic standpoint, it's roughly $1 trillion worth of food which is wasted every year. And the kind of our estimate is that around $100 billion of that is wasted in kind of food service and the hospitality sector. So we have a pretty long way to go in solving this problem. Currently, Winnow is saving its customers about $42 million worth of food every year, right? So we're really proud of that, and that's meaningful. I like to think about the number of meals that we're preventing. So every year we're preventing about 36 million meals from the trash, which for me, just on a moral standpoint, is something that I'm really proud of. But we have a huge ways to go, right? It's a massive global problem, and we're only really just getting started, right? So we're excited about the impact that tools like this can have. We're working as hard as we can to scale them, and there's a global goal to halve food waste by 2030, and we think that this is part of the kind of ecosystem of solutions that's going to help us to get there.
Sure. How do you, what is the system, I guess like a basic model entry level for an organization? What are the costs associated with the system?
So it
rough numbers. I know, I'm sure.
Sure. And I'm not going to give you a politician's answer here. It really does depend on the kitchen and some of the kind of specifics of the kitchen. But we have like the kind of most basic version is a tablet only version that a user will kind of tap. Yeah, exactly. And that's good for a small cafe or a kiosk who just wants to get a good measurement in terms of the food that's being thrown away, or an enterprise who wants full measurement across all of their sites. And there'll be one type of solution for a big kitchen or a big hotel, and then there'll be other kitchens which are smaller, but they want all of the data to feed into one central place. And so kind of having a solution for every kitchen is really important.
Right. That's a key component to that, managing across major kitchens. So what your flagship, you got your AI enabled camera system. What's that usually go like? What's the price range around that? And then what's the typical volume of a kitchen that tends to be able to benefit quite a bit from it?
Yeah. So I mean, any kitchen that's spending, $150,000, $200,000 a year on food is probably going to see a good return. Okay. But we're working with large kitchens, with big box hotels, with resorts, with cruise ships. In those areas, it's an absolute no-brainer. It's one of the most impactful investments that a hospitality business could make, in particular in an environment where we're all on a march to net zero. Every kind of corporation is putting forward their roadmap to achieve net zero and reduce their scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and this falls within that category. It's a kind of a very good example of low-hanging fruit. And so what we're working on is getting to a place where that technology can be scaled to every kitchen. At the moment, we're focusing our attention on where there's the biggest opportunity, right?
Right. Because they can benefit the most, so then they can pay a substantial enough fee for justify the product installation, and then that gets reinvested in scaling up the production of the product. And hopefully you're getting to, in the future, lower and lower stepped price. So you can get the fancy AI tech into smaller and smaller kitchens.
And then the AI gets smarter. There's less that the user has to do. Right. They kind of sketched out that vision for the future where, you're a kitchen owner of any size, and you want to become more efficient and you want to minimize your food waste. Well, the vision is install a piece of hardware, get the data, understand the problem, make improvements, and allow the AI to perform that task for you. So long term, that's where we're working towards. We're a way off that yet, but we're making some really good progress.
Right on. Yeah. So taking your $42 million savings for your customers, it's not quite fair to then divide that by 4,500 installs and say like everybody's averaging 10K. And no, it depends on what they're using,
Exactly.
where it's placed, and then some folks are making substantial. So you would call Winnow Solutions. You'd have somebody do an analysis, come in, take a look at your kitchen, right? Is that part of
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
process? And then
exactly.
say like, we think this will achieve X for
Yeah,
you.
and we have, really good data points now based on different verticals and
Mhm.
different geographies and different kitchen types, and we can generally create a pretty good forecast of what the savings potential would be. And our clients tell us that that's helpful because they obviously want to focus on the quick wins, and the data that we have allows them to do that. And you know, I think in the future, it will just be normal that every kitchen uses technology to measure food waste. At the moment, it's sensible to say, right, well, where can I have the biggest impact? And the place that you can have the biggest impact is your larger kitchens, where
Of course.
there's more food produced, and therefore there's more of an opportunity to reduce wastage.
Right. Well, more likely that you're wasting more of it, right? In a sense, because there's more volume of it,
Yeah,
more,
exactly. Yeah.
it's floating hotels in the ocean just got to
There's more. There's
load up
yeah,
with food. That's,
and
that's
there's
the
more.
thing to do.
There's more complexity. I think that's the word,
Sure.
right? It's complexity. There's more complexity in those operations, right? And in any operation where you have complexity, data and insight is important for you to build better processes and more efficient operations, right? So that's the kind of angle that we look at it from.
Sure. But just because you can measure something doesn't mean that the thing you're measuring is really part of the value of the process going through, right? That's the problem I have with just web analytics where I'm coming from. But
Mm.
in general, if you can get the tool into the right spot, and you can get this thing to identify the variability in the food that you're sort of throwing into the bin, I mean, that sounds fantastic. Do you have some degree of accuracy thresholds you talk about, or are you just kind of like, if somebody's really that interested in hearing that in a presentation, you get into? But is there something you can give us a taste of that?
So we have specific thresholds that we look at.
Yeah.
So when an item is thrown away and there's an image that's captured, there's an accuracy threshold that we apply, and if the model delivers a kind of a prediction score of a certain level, it will serve a short list of 8 items. If we're not confident of what that item is, then the user will often have to go through and kind of manually record that item. But as we build up more photos of that particular item, obviously the level of accuracy will improve. But like I said, we have 600 items that we've trained up. What's really interesting about that is we have sites in Asia. So we have a whole kind of side of Asian cuisine that the model is really familiar with. We're kind of starting to expand in other parts of the world, like the Caribbean, and it's really interesting, kind of starting to build up this massive data set with all these different types of cuisine in it, and kind of teaching the AI to recognize all of these different types of food is an interesting exercise. And every kind of deployment that we are sent to in a different part of the world, it's an interesting task to kind of understand the cuisine and the environments, the culture, the type of food that's being produced, how that food is presented, kind of how difficult it might be to identify what a particular item is. We kind of think a lot about how to use an AI to identify things like curries and stews, which is a difficult problem. But we're getting there, and effectively, if you as a human can differentiate between different types of food items, then eventually the AI will be able to do the same.
Now, you guys are focused in the kitchens, but what about food processing in other environments? Is there a future there for you guys as well, or?
Yeah, for sure. There's we're being asked by lots of different types of food producers, some manufacturing, some ghost kitchens, a number of other kind of environments of how the technology might be applied there as well. Right now, we're really focused on our kind of key verticals, which are kind of contract catering, hotels, cruise ships, resorts, and casinos and retailers. But in the future, there's no reason that we couldn't open this up, and we're really open to kind of new use cases and seeing where the technology can really add value.
Have you, it's probably I'm sure COVID has had an impact on it. They certainly has had an impact on those target customer segments,
Of
right?
course.
Has that impacted your ability to engage with them in the past year, or has it just sort of got them even more thinking about other ways,
So
open to other ideas?
I think there's a couple of things here. I mean, obviously, first and foremost, the pandemic has had a huge impact on all of us. From a commercial standpoint, obviously the lockdowns, the disruption to the industry, the uncertainty in demand made it really difficult for hospitality operators to kind of at first to navigate their way through this. We saw relative levels of food waste go up by as much as 50% on the month of a reopening, right? And that's because you maybe have a different team who are going back into the kitchen. They don't know exactly how many people are going to be coming through the door. They might not have, data to kind of help them make that decisions. And what we would say would be, given all of that uncertainty, given all of the other challenges when it comes to labor shortages, supply chain, etc., kind of making sure you've still got a handle on your food waste is never been more important. It's never been more important because your margins are already being stretched, so you literally can't afford to throw good food away. As we kind of go into the future, and we hopefully move past the kind of the kind of really sharp end of the crisis, and we learn to live with the disease. It's obvious that we can't go back to the old normal, if that makes sense, right? There is this on a kind of consumer front. We can't go back to the unsustainable way of living. There is a massive movement towards, mobilizing into a more sustainable world. We know what the implications can be in kind of if the way that we're used to living is taken away from us, and we're not able to kind of exist with the freedoms that we previously enjoyed. And so on a corporate level, as I mentioned before, this march towards net zero is becoming a kind of it's not a nice to have, it's an essential. Every business needs to be looking at how it reduces its impact, and food waste is a really kind of attractive proposition there. It is a big impact when it comes to carbon emissions, but it is also a profitable way of reducing costs.
There's
and
value.
So
you're unlocking value without
exactly right.
increasing the labor to get to it, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
It's so good. It's such a good spot. Are you guys a publicly traded company yet?
Not yet. We're a B corporation. Which,
okay.
If your listeners are unfamiliar, effectively means that we have taken a decision to be
triple bottom line.
Yeah, triple bottom line, people and planet as well as profit. It's the way that we make our decisions as a business, and the way that we think about the growth of our company. The kind of North Star that we're mobilized around and that we're all working towards is to save $1 billion worth of food every year. So we're at 42 million right now. We've got a long way to go, but we have a roadmap to get there. So that's the way that we think of things. In the future, we hope that there's lots of value that's created in this space, not just from, what our company's doing, but from others in the space. There's $1 trillion worth of food being thrown away. Somebody should get rich here, but hopefully we also save a lot in terms of the kind of the wastage, making our food system more sustainable and more fair on a kind of global basis.
I mean, this sounds like a very exciting spot to be in, because you're sort of you got two pressures that are converging for you guys, right? I mean, obviously the technology, AI has improved, and the ability to get cheap load from Amazon Web Services and things. It's just amazing. It's like, what? This is so like only a handful of years you'd have to have a data center, rack space, and here just turn it on, just enable it at this point. And so that's creating that's enabling smaller companies to create these neural nets, right? That are able to
100%.
identify the images and then, develop a library, that set of machine learning language algorithmic response. And then you got the compelling forces on the restaurant industry. It's like, it's been hard what they've gone through, but also it's like, it's time to also look at where we are not, where we're wasting dollars, really. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to for a restaurant. They're already on tight margins. So is there something we can automate that can reach out that value?
Yeah.
You guys
and I think we need to be pointing our innovation and technology now more than ever at problems which really need to be solved. We don't have a lot of time to right many of the wrongs of the way our global economy works. And we really, really need to point as much of our attention to new innovations, which take advantage of new technologies to solve problems. But where we have technologies that we know work, we need to scale that as quickly as possible. And that's, I think, my message to the broader sector would be: if you produce food in any meaningful scale, to be looking at where technology can really help you reduce waste at a scale is something that every food business should do.
Yeah, and it just sounds exciting to work with a company like you guys, where you're learning. Like, if I had a restaurant and I have your AI product, like, I'm one of 4,500 other restaurants that are also training the system just by using it, just by being involved with it. And so as you guys grow, I mean, it's just going to get more accurate over time, which I'll be then able to apply into the business that I have, right? And so if you're a restaurant that's not using these kinds of technologies, at some point, these other restaurants will be more efficient and being able to pull more profitability. What does that mean, right? Like, in other words, if you're a business owner that's not looking at this from the restaurant's perspective, you need to start looking, right?
Yeah. And I think, I mean, like, what's kind of interesting for our clients is, so you say you shave 5% off your food purchasing costs, right? What do you want to do with that? Right? Do you want to bank that and improve your bottom line? Do you want to hire someone else, and perform a job that wasn't possible, to kind of improve another area of your business or improve overall levels of customer service, right? Do you want to reinvest? And many of our kind of premium kitchens and your kind of luxury hotels will take that money, and they're happy with the margins they're making, and they'll reinvest it into better quality product. They can invest it into a lobster seafood buffet, for example, that's going to improve customer satisfaction and set them apart from their competition. So there's all these kind of possibilities that kind of start to open up once you start to kind of
the value.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of up to the individual kitchen and business in terms of what they want to do with the savings.
Yeah. Man. David, thank you so much. This is really intriguing where you guys are. And I keep saying this to every guest lately, but I'd love to have you guys back. I'd love to see the next iteration of the product and what you're doing. Maybe we can look at some of the UI,
Absolutely.
to sort of look at what it's like. But in open door. So if you guys have some future news, please come by the show. Let's keep talking about this, because I'm definitely intrigued. Yeah. The more you can automate the mining of value in a process of a business, the more then you free up that value savings to reapply in other ways. So it's going to speed up, all kinds of different ways that I think are unanticipated, that we just couldn't do even like a handful of years ago. Right.
Yeah.
So,
well, listen, thanks for the invitation to come and speak with you. It's been great to have the conversation.
Yeah. Take care. All right. And thanks you guys for listening. Bye.
Visit throughthenoise.us for more episodes and subscribe to our newsletter. This show is produced by Through the Noise Consulting, uniting external communications and internal IT functions to ensure data and privacy are protected while creating innovative communications platforms. Want to start your own podcast? We can help. Visit getthroughthenoise.com to learn more.